All right, everyone. Welcome to Monday night. I hope your week has not been as chaotic as mine, but we have a fantastic author on tonight, New York Times best-selling author Mark Greaney. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We're going to bring Mark on here in just a second. But lastly, don't forget to go to tillzerocoffee.com and get your coffee, because Till Zero is doing great things in the veteran community, taking care of veterans and trying to stop suicide in both veterans and first responders. So make sure you go to tillzerocoffee.com, grab yourself a bag. Let's bring Mark on and see what's been going on with Mark. Mark, you see us?
I see you. You're not seeing me?
No. What is going on here? Hold on. There you are. Okay, I got you now. Can you see me? We're good?
Yeah, looking good.
Okay, awesome. How you doing, man? Midnight Black's out. How's it going?
It's going good. Been just doing publicity for the past couple weeks. Yeah, just running all over the place, but everything's going good.
How has the book tour gone so far? Are you done with stops? Do you got more left?
I'm done with my stops. I've got several more days of sitting back here in my office doing Zooms and whatnot. But yeah, all last week was going to different towns, and we had really good reception. So it's actually really fun to do. It's that the fun part is that 2 hours in the evening or 3 hours in the evening, and all the travel and new town every day type of thing that gets kind of old, but it's worth it at the end of the day.
How's the interaction with the fans on this book tour?
It's always a blast. It's funny because I've been doing this for 15 years now, and there's people that I'll look out in the crowd and I'll see them, and I'm kind of one of those like weird people pleaser types where I'm going like, oh, I think I told this story when that guy was here before, and you can't really do too much about that. But no, it's fantastic to see people the same faces and then more faces, and then most of my events are ticketed events, so you can see exactly how many people showed up and obviously how many books are sold. So it's a blast. I wish I did more cities, but then I'm always behind in my writing. So
Yeah.
something's pulling me the other direction.
Yeah. So you posted something on social media the other day about your travels. I thought it was very interesting. You had a driverless car was it on the way to the airport picking you up? Tell us a little bit about that and what that experience was like, because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, there's a few cities that use Waymo, Waymo, and it's a driverless car. It's a Jaguar, and it must be like really subsidized or something because it's like $12 for a ride,
Really?
several miles. So I was in Scottsdale, Arizona for that, and I've used the Waymos there the last couple of years, and it's fine. Everybody's going like, I don't trust it, and I'm like, I don't know that I trust the Uber driver at 5 in the morning that smells like weed. It's like
Good point.
you're rolling the dice either way. But yeah, it was kind of cool to do. It does. I haven't had any bad experiences with it. Every now and then you'll see something on TV about some Waymo went crazy, but human beings can be dicey as well, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. Was this your first experience in a driverless car?
No, I think last year when I was in Scottsdale, I knew they had them. So I had a book called The Chaos Agent out, and it was all
Mm-hmm.
about artificial intelligence and
Yeah, it was.
that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, that'll be fun after doing all this research. And nothing weird happened. And so I probably was in 5 Waymos last year, and I was probably in 4 this year. So I have no problem with it so far.
I have never been in one. What was your first experience like? Do you remember your first experiences sitting behind, I guess behind the driver, quote unquote, of one of
Yeah.
those?
Well, it's surreal. I've had nightmares about, just realizing I'm in the back seat of my own car and there's nobody behind the wheel. So it's a little tough to get used to, but it's like a Jaguar. It's a real nice car, and there's just a screen in the back, and you hit a button that says start your ride, and you go. And it has cameras. I mean, there's people watching you, I'm sure,
Sure.
because those cars don't get torn up, or people don't do weird stuff in them. So I guess there's probably people watching you as you go. But yeah,
Hmm.
other than that, it just feels like a normal ride, and just a less chatty driver.
Yeah. Do they play music or anything, or is it just dead
Yeah,
quiet?
yeah. I don't know if you can choose the music, but it's always this kind of like new agey stuff, and I always wonder if that's like piped in there to keep you calm. You know, like they say, like in prison, they have like, I don't know, pastels on the wall because it keeps the prisoners calm. And it's like
Wow.
I hear that music and I'm like, is that supposed to sedate me? Because it's kind of working.
So is that the new elevator music?
It's kind of like souped up. It's like when you're in the lobby of like a kind of a swanky hotel, or in the elevator of a swanky hotel, and it plays that kind of like new agey stuff that
Hmm.
you don't really hear anywhere else.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that that was as much of an option. I thought it was kind of still picking up. I didn't know that it was gaining in popularity as much until I saw you post about it, and I was like, "Wow,
I think
that's
I think
interesting."
it's test. I think it's test cities where they do it. I know they have them in Austin and they have them in Scottsdale, and I think San Francisco or something, like the places you might guess that they would have it is where they
Yeah,
have them.
yeah. Austin doesn't surprise me. I guess San
Yeah,
Francisco really doesn't either. Um,
right,
Scottsdale, I guess, would Scottsdale, Phoenix, I would
right.
expect. Yeah, it's a pretty big city. I don't know about any
Yeah,
other ones. I don't know if they have them in Oklahoma City here, but I'd be curious to see if they did though. I know they have scooters
yeah,
everywhere downtown in Oklahoma City.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
rent a scooter on every friggin' block. It seems like it's
yeah.
it's
Same
it's
here.
crazy. Um,
Yeah.
how's the weather been out there? Because it up until today, it's been absolutely frigid here. I mean, we got 70
Yeah,
degrees today, but it's been absolutely freezing.
yeah. So I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and all last week I was gone, but I was hearing about how cold it was, and came home to snow and ice on the ground. And um, my tour started in St. Louis, and it was really cold. So that would have been a week ago today. So
Yeah,
cold. And then I went to Phoenix, where of course it was fantastic. And then I went to Dallas and up into Indiana, and it was cold. I guess you expect that this time of year, but yeah,
yeah.
right now here in Memphis, it was in the 60s today and sunny. So
Hmm.
I'll take that. I imagine, there's always that false moment where you go like, oh, I guess it's spring and we're not going to have to deal with any more cold temperatures. And you always get hit like twice more after that.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're waiting on our third or fourth winter to roll through because
Yeah.
Oklahoma's always like that. We have a couple of days, 70, 60 degrees, where it's nice and sunny. The snow and all that stuff melts, things dry up, and then another cold front rolls through. And here it's just
Yeah.
bitter cold. I don't know what it's like in Memphis, but we get it might be like 20 degrees outside, both like a 25 to 35 mile an hour wind chill gusts,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah. You have
just
those planes. Yeah.
it's bitter, but it's one of the best places in the world to learn how to fly an airplane because they say if you can deal with the crosswinds, you can
Oh,
fly
yeah.
anywhere. And
Yeah.
the pilots here at the base, they don't like it, but compared to other conditions, like, hey, if you can fly here, you can fly anywhere because
Yeah.
it's that bad sometimes.
Yeah. You might as well learn how to do it right.
Hmm. So let's talk about another thing you posted on social media recently, and that was your trip to Staccato. I believe you went with Josh Hood and Brad Taylor, and I'm super duper jealous. I want to hear all about that tour and what was that like. Did they invite you out, or how did that work?
They invited me out. They've been so nice to me. I have one of my characters using a staccato, and the only reason that happened in the first place was I was just at the range with Josh Hood, who's a buddy of mine and also a great writer, and he had a staccato, and so I shot that, and I just could see a character in my book using it, and usually it's Glocks and Sigs and the usual suspects, right? And
Hmm.
every now and then the villain has something, quote unquote, exotic, Steyr or something like that. But
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about it. I didn't know anything about staccatos, but I really loved his. I put it in the book. I think I met the guys or some of the guys at SHOT Show or NRA or something a couple years back, and then they invited us to come out to their range. And of course, I don't know if you've been there, but absurdly, it's amazing. It's huge. I think it's 600 acres. Their
Wow.
Staccato Ranch, yeah, and they have
Golly.
all sorts of different things. And so we spent a whole day, and it wasn't just us. They had all these people in from the different law enforcement agencies and government, like federal law enforcement, and I think they were all we were all like shooting the new guns, the HDs, and they were asking for our opinions on them, and of course, my skill level is, man, this is great. This is awesome. Everybody else is like, I don't know, a third serration right here, or a little more stippling right here. And I was going like, this is the coolest gun. Maybe the only other gun as good I've ever shot is the Staccato that they gave me a year before, which was the big XS XC and XS. And it was fantastic. And, we went to dinner with the guys and the
Wow.
women, and just had a really great time. And I was just at SHOT Show in January and saw them all again. And they said they were going to send us a gun, but it's one of those things like, you're like, sure you are. I mean, they'd already given me one gun. I'm like, I don't know why you're giving me a second gun.
Yeah,
But they
they're
sent
expensive.
yeah, they're expensive. But they sent this case with a couple knives and like a really nice pen.
Yeah, I saw it online. I was like,
yeah,
man, they didn't
a
just send
copy
you a gun. They sent you
I know. A
something
leather
sweet.
copy of the Constitution. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was fabulous. And, I can't thank them enough. And it really does help my books to be around the men and women that do this. And then also, understand the gear a little bit better, and then have an appreciation for like, what's the difference between a $500 gun and a $3,000 gun, and it was a great time.
What is the difference between?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that.
No, I'm gonna ask you. I've asked Josh Hood before when I had him on.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on it because, I'm not a law enforcement guy. I don't shoot a ton, but I do shoot some. So what is the difference for guys like me? What is the difference between such a nice gun and $500 Glock 19?
I think it's quality materials and tolerances. I mean, it just feels good. In the XC I have, it just feels like really good in my hand. And this gun, I haven't shot it yet, to be honest with you, because I've been on tour. I think I got it like 2 days before I left town. And, I have a buddy down here where I live. He's actually in North Mississippi, and he's a law enforcement guy, SWAT guy. And he borrowed my first one, and he's like, yeah, I'll give it back to you in August. It's like 6 months later. He's like, this is incredible. And he spends his days shooting, and I think they carry SIGs down there. I know they do. And, it's the people who know can tell. For me, it just, it just feels better, and it shoots great. They're just the very low recoil. My only way to judge something is, does it make me look stupid, or does it make me look better than I am? And it makes me look better than I am. So that's
do
that's
the
good enough
groupings
for
go
me.
from this down to this? Like that's
Exactly.
That's all I care about.
As opposed to the opposite, which you wouldn't want.
I know, right? Getting those flyers off to the left or the right. And like, that's always my problem going out to the range is I got to spend the magazine getting warmed up because until I get my grip right, and then I'm good to go. But I like taking my old man out as much as I can, even if it's just wasting ammo, just because it's fun to shoot with him. But, those Staccatos are so nice. I mean, they look nice. I've heard from so many people, including yourself, how nice they are, shoot low recoil. But man, they're a bit pricey.
Yeah, they are. But, I think there's a market for them for sure.
Oh, no doubt. I keep seeing more and more of them. I think it's becoming more. I mean, I don't want to say like they're replacing the 1911s, but it seems like for a few years there, high dollar 1911s were very, very popular. People are buying them. There's a whole community of people who lived and died by 1911s.
Yeah,
and I feel like maybe Staccato's moving into, and it's based off of a 1911 kind of platform. Sure. So it definitely has a market, as you're saying.
Yeah, and I really like the grip angle. It's different, and I think that the 2011, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I think it's a good weapon.
So let's talk about Midnight Black a little bit. And you've gone to Russia before. What kind of research did you do for this one? It's kind of high tensions right now. I don't know if you went to Russia for this one. You normally go on a research trip. Probably not the best idea to go to Russia right now, but you've gone in the past. So how did that kind of play into doing the research for this one?
Yeah, there's a do not travel advisory from the State Department. And I don't really listen to them when it's like caution, because every place is caution. And frankly, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. So there's probably, there would be a State Department caution for me walking from my back house into my house.
Right.
So that's not the worst thing in the world. But, the do not travel obviously means something to me. And then you just watch the news. And any American that would go to Russia has a big chance of just getting picked up, held on something trumped up, and then whenever traded back for somebody in the West. But you might spend it. I was talking to somebody about it, and they're like, hey, that you'd sell a lot of books if you did that. And I'm like, thank God I'm doing okay without having to go sit in a gulag for a couple of years. But
how do you write the next book if you're sitting in a gulag? They're going to hold on to you for a little bit. Be like, we got Mark Greaney. You want him back? You're going to have to give us this.
Yeah, they don't let you take your laptop, from what I understand.
No.
I was fortunate to be able to go to Russia several years ago when I was working on a book with Tom Clancy, and it was a Jack Ryan novel. And so I spent a lot of time in. Most of the time I spent was in Moscow, but I also went up to St. Petersburg, and both cities feature somewhat in the book, not so much St. Petersburg, but it's in there a little bit. But there's scenes in the novel in the Moscow subway. There are, places where I was, and I have pictures and videos from, and Gorky Park, I have pictures and video from, and it was very helpful. And also, I got the feel of the country back then, and I thought there was kind of a dark, edgy feel to at least mostly in Moscow, more in Moscow than in St. Petersburg. But that all made its way into the book. So even though I couldn't go this time, fortunately, it's a place that I've been before, and I was able to kind of draw on that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we can't go there right now because Russia does have a culture and has very beautiful places to go visit. It's just
Yeah,
unfortunate that it's so topsy turvy when it comes to our relationship with them right now. And
yeah.
Putin went further into Ukraine today. I saw on the
Mm,
news.
mm.
So it's like I really hope that they get a deal done. I'm not real confident that he would hold up his end of the bargain if there was a deal done. But
Yeah, I think he would hold it up as long as it benefited him, and he needs a couple years to restock and regroup and
yeah,
rearm, and then he would violate the treaty or whatever, just like he's done everything else. And I think that's the concern and that's the fear. Like you said, they fired something like 1,100 missiles and drones towards Ukraine yesterday. Most were taken down by electronic warfare or anti missile technology, but some got through. And
yeah,
the day that we announced we were going to meet unilaterally, or not with Russia in Riyadh, that the next day or that night they crashed a Shahed, an Iranian drone, a suicide drone, into the protective layer over Chernobyl,
yeah.
keeping
I
the
saw
keeping the
that.
nuclear material. So Russia's like, yeah, we'll play your game, but we're going to just keep pummeling these guys just because we can. So um, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, and attacking Chernobyl's bad for the entire region. Like,
Yeah, but
what are you doing?
they fired artillery shells at Zaporizhia, which is an active nuclear facility, and back in the beginning of the war, they were doing there was a
Yeah,
lot of warfare going right around that. So they have shown that they don't really care, and I think it's I think it's part of the terror campaign that
hmm,
this war has been. When they realized they weren't going to be able to take Kiev in uh, in 3 days, and they didn't get the airport like they thought they would, which would have changed everything. I
oh
think
yeah,
it's been a terror campaign. Like, let's fire an Iskander missile into a children's cancer hospital. Just let's video us shooting POWs, or
hmm,
what is the human safari thing? They're using these little suicide drones to just blow up babushkas on their bicycles and that sort of thing. I think it's just sort of a terror situation to try and make Ukraine accept some kind of a peace.
yeah. I saw. I think it was last week, and I made a note. I was going to ask you about it, and I saw that Ukraine has a new drone that can go underneath the water and hover and stay there, and then
Oh
it can
wow,
come up out of the water and then loiter and attack from above. And I thought,
wow,
a waterproof drone. Yeah, I don't know how far
yeah,
deep it can go, but it went deep
yeah,
enough where it was at least a foot or two in the water, and
yeah,
then it
yeah,
came up out of it. Like to have that kind of lift, I thought that's
yeah.
science fiction. That's
It's like,
straight out of a thriller book. That's out of the Chaos Agent. I thought that
yeah,
was crazy.
yeah. Right now, Ukraine is the largest drone manufacturer on planet Earth by necessity. And I was doing research last summer when I was writing this book and into the fall on the technology, and it was just sort of getting bigger and more advanced. I can't remember the name of it. I probably wouldn't pronounce it right. Anyway, they have one of their drones that's named after some like some bread, some Ukrainian bread, and it has this name because it's difficult for Russians to say, and it's a word that if a Russian says it, they would know it was a Russian saying it. So it's kind of like a little counterintelligence thing, which I thought was cool. But it is a rocket drone hybrid, and I think it has a 1,000 kilometer range or something like that. So as I was writing the book, there's a big set piece at the end of the story that is a large scale battle. I mean, the book is about these few characters that I really want people to get behind and root for or root
Mm-hmm.
against, depending on the situation. But there is this big battle that's involved, and I kept sort of redesigning the munitions that were being used in the battle as technology would change from week to week. I'd read some article about yesterday Ukraine fired 88 drones, and I'm like, okay, I can make this bigger. And then it's 245 drones, and now you got 1,000 drone nights going off, and my little battles, because I wanted to be somewhat realistic, and
Mm-hmm.
or as realistic as possible without me being an expert on air defense batteries and all these other things. So I did look into a lot of things, but the scope of the attacks, especially the air attacks, was just growing and growing as I would go through the next edits. I'd go
Yeah.
like, yeah, 245 drones. That's not as big as I'm making it out to be, and I kept sort of modifying the battle to make it a scale that seemed like it was close to what we were going to see in the real world.
I actually saw another article today. Now that we're talking about it, about I think it's the company here in the U.S. I think that had a drone that they were trying to get into the hands of the American military and their allies, and it was no joke the size of a football, and it
Mm,
looked just like a football. It looked like a black metal football, but on the
mm,
end it had like the tail fins that would pop out and it would spin. Like it was
wow.
just, it was Call of Duty looking. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just an insane looking thing,
Yeah.
and they held it up next to like a Super Bowl football, and it was
Yeah.
like they were almost
The same
exactly the
size.
same size. It was scary. I mean, it looked like that's how it could be launched. If anybody could
Yeah.
just throw it and toss it up in the air, crazy the way technology is advancing.
Yeah.
It's almost scary.
Yeah. And there, we do have drones that are not very big, but that are very, very lethal. And of course, they have drones that can just haul a single grenade. And if you put that grenade in the right place, I mean, they're just dropping them straight into turrets of tanks, and you can
Mm-hmm.
take out a T-72 from the inside out. And they were doing that a couple of years ago, and that's gotten more and more sophisticated. And I've seen some video. If you look at that Funker 520 or whatever, there's video that just looks like something out of a horror movie of these guys in trenches, and you can hear the buzzing of the drones, and the drones literally enter the trenches, going around looking for. I mean, it is something out of a horror movie. And just a few months ago, or maybe 2 months ago, there was the first all mechanical engagement. The Ukrainians had an entire engagement with Russian forces where the Ukrainians had ground drones and air drones. They weren't AI driven; they were driven by, first person, cameras. But it
Wow.
was basically ground and air drones coordinating together and attacking Russian forces. And that's only going in one direction. 5 years from now, there's going to be a lot more of that, and we're going to be, in Terminator, Star Wars area at some
Right?
point, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something. I think I saw. There's been a lot of drone stuff in the news lately. I think I saw something last week where they had developed a skin to go on a drone. I think I
Mm,
reposted it on Instagram. It
mm,
was horrifying the way
yeah.
they. It wasn't like a human skin, but it was like all white. But it was no joke, like a skin that could go over one of their drones.
Wow.
And I was like, we're definitely nobody watched any movies. Anybody at these big companies watched any movies?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Where are you guys leading us? There was just
yeah.
a thing, the SBU, Ukrainian intelligence, just pulled off some operation where they had managed to stick C4 or Semtex or something inside somewhere in the production line of the goggles that the Russian VR guys were using. And they had confirmations of like 7 guys' goggles blow up. The bomb would detonate when the cooling fan went on. So you had to have it on for a minute. Cooling fan would go on, and the goggles would detonate on and blind the guys. And you know,
Wow.
isn't that it's always how warfare's been from the beginning of time. It's like this innovation creates this problem for the other side. They create an innovation to counter that or something better, and it just keeps going back and forth. And that, I
Yeah.
mean, it's the innovation is driven by this necessity in a time of war, and it's scary. It's awesome, but awesome things can be scary.
Yeah. Well, it's like the pager stuff that they used in Iran.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, that was horrifying. that
Yeah.
you could have it just on your hip or in your pocket, and then they figured out a way of making that explosive. I don't know how they did it. I didn't look that much into it. I just
Yeah.
know it was horrifying to
Yeah.
think of that. I can't imagine having goggles on your face and that happening.
Yeah, yeah. If it happens to your buddy, you're taking those goggles off. So
Oh, immediately.
you don't have to blow up every set of goggles in Russia for that to suddenly be an issue. Same thing with those beepers.
Yeah. So for Midnight Black, Court has to sneak back into Russia. I don't want to spoil everything, so I'm gonna try to stay spoiler free. He's got to sneak back into Russia. Not only sneak back into Russia, but he's got to make his way to a penal colony and execute a rescue. And this is very action-packed, driven, gray man book. But how did you study how the penal colonies were kind of built so that you could build this fictional penal colony as accurate as possible? Because once he gets in there, there's a lot of close quarter action. Walk
Yeah.
us through how you kind of came up with that.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, there's not a ton of primary sources on what these places are. This penal colony that's used in this story is a real place, YK2 Yavas in Mordovia. But I haven't seen like the schematics of the place. I haven't seen video inside that place other than in sort of some conference rooms and things. But it's a women's correctional colony. But there's 700. I don't remember the number. 708, 712, something like that. Federal penal colonies or housing facilities all across Russia, from Siberia all the way down to the Ukrainian border. There's these kind of temporary detention camps that they've set up, and a whole lot of them, including the one in Yavas, were created by Joseph Stalin in the early 1930s. So this camp, this work penal camp in the book, and the one nearby, 10 kilometers away, was built in 1931, and the buildings are the same. The fences and gates are the same or repaired versions of them. Obviously, they have cameras and other technology. And I was able to learn about some of the other technology that are employed by the prison system in Russia. But for a lot of the kind of the drama and the feel for what it's like, living in a work camp and essentially being worked to death, or working 16 hours a day, I read old like Soviet era stuff, Gulag Archipelago, and stuff about life in the gulags, because I found more of that. Definitely found some lengthy documentary videos on like what it's like in Russian prisons around Russia, and studied every one of those. At some point you also fictionalize what you've done, because
Sure.
you have to make if I have an action scene, I can't spend 5,000 words explaining to you that there's actually a wall that juts off this way about 3 meters, but forget about that. That's not going to be important. But like you have to describe things sort of economically, so you simplify things a little bit. But at the same time, I wanted to know it intimately in my head to kind of build that story up. So, it's bleak and it's horrible, and it's completely unjust how men and women are worked over there. And I wanted to portray that, just to show the desperation that Zoya is the character. Her name's Zoya Zakharova, and Court's in love with her, and everybody in the West that he trusts are pretty sure she got executed in Lefortovo prison, but he just won't let himself believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit of a spoiler, but it's also on the inside flap of the book, so I can say that she is there, and she is in the prison. That's always the thing. I appreciate people like you. They're like, I'm not going to spoil it, because sometimes you do interviews and I'm going like, all right, come on, let's not talk about chapter 23. but at the same time, I'm kind of like going like, yeah, I kind of know what's printed on the outside of the book, so we can talk about.
We can go that far.
As the author, I would love it if people would read the book knowing nothing, not a single thing, even who the lead character is. But that's completely not realistic for selling your book. So I get how the game is played. But yeah, that's essentially the story.
Well, this is another fantastic Gray Man book. I mean, Court Gentry is at the top of his game, and this one is very action packed. It's awesome how you can go from these different kind of situations and topics and things that are focused around it, and Court seems to find his way through it from, years ago, Sierra 6 and the dual timelines, and kind of hit past catching up to him, to the Chaos Agent and Burner being kind of different. Seeing where he goes and how he interacts with that, I think is the best part about it, because you don't have to sit here and wait for a theme. He's not on a specific mission necessarily. It's what are the odds up against him, and what does he have to deal with, and how is he going to get through it? And that's what I think makes the Gray Man so unique and awesome. And I loved this book. I thought it was one of your most action packed in a while.
Thank you very much.
And I
appreciate that.
You blister through it, and you're just waiting. When is he really going to have to deal with getting in this prison? And then, spoiler alert, once he does, it's go time for real.
Yeah. There's a lot of factors at play, and there's big geopolitical stuff going on, and then very small scale, as you said, small unit tactics stuff going on. There's a lot of intrigue because the GRU, Russian internal security, there's a colonel in the GRU who's trying to lure Court into a trap. There's a whole bunch of twists and turns in this story. As I started writing the story, I'm like, oh, this will be easy. It's a story about him going to rescue the woman he loves. It's like, that's very, one direction. But as I'm writing it, I'm going, that's not a Gray Man novel. He's got to have things pitted against him other than fences and guys with guns. There's a lot of other
it was not so easy for him to get into Russia this time around. Like, that's a big part of the book. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to stay spoiler free, but
you're doing great. Better than me, probably.
It was not easy for him to get into Russia. Obviously, he eventually does, but getting in there was a big part of the first act and a half of getting in there. That was a huge part. So it's far from an easy trip, that's for sure. But what's next for the Gray Man? Do you have an idea of what's going on next, or where it's going to go next?
Yeah, I have an idea. I'm actually working on the 15th book, and it's not like I'm avoiding talking about it. It's I don't have it that well thought out. I am going to be going to Northern Ireland in April to do some research on it. It's going to be like one of the locations, but a lot of the book is going to be domestic in the U.S. and a couple different locations. And I'll turn it in the summer, and this one's going to be less geopolitical. I think I'm going to have a scene at SHOT Show. Actually, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I kind of figured out how to make it fun.
Really?
Not a huge fight scene. That sounds cool until you think like, why do they have the ammo? It's like there's a lot of issues. How many of these guys are strapped anyway, even if they're not supposed to be? It's like it doesn't seem like a smart place for my hero, who's basically an invisible man, to pull a gun out and start shooting. But there's a domestic component to the story that sort of takes him through Las Vegas. And why not do it in January? What the heck?
Yeah, why not? Right before your normal February release. I think that's a really cool idea, especially going to it'd be fun to see how he navigates such a big convention with so many people and so many opportunities for trouble.
Yeah. And so many people who look like they might they're exactly the people he's looking for when he's like looking into a crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody there's wearing Solomons and cargo pants, and not making fun of anybody, but I mean everybody there is going to look a certain type.
The steely-eyed dudes and.
Mm-hmm. So you posted a Washington Post article that I thought was really, really interesting. And politics aside, I thought the premise of the article and who it came from was really, really unique, because it doesn't just talk about the Trump administration's potential misstep, but if you ignore that part of it and just look at the content inside, it really talks about serious auditory and neurological symptoms from weapons that we don't fully understand yet. What was your take on that article and kind of what they were explaining and how that was such an important piece of intelligence?
Are you talking about the Havannah syndrome stuff?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So, I've done just reading about the Havannah syndrome. Is, if anyone doesn't know, apparently different people in the U.S. intelligence community and just the diplomatic community started suffering from these really bad headaches. And it always seemed to start with a loud noise and just pain. They'd be sitting in their apartment in Croatia or Malta, or there's a lot of different locations, not just Havana. But I think it was first documented by somebody in Havana, although they've gone back to, I think, 2014 or 2016. And I think the consensus is, there's no consensus, but the people that I sort of take stock in think it is some sort of a pulse energy weapon. There's microwave burst. People say that we haven't figured out how to do that yet, but there's a doctor in the GRU in their unit 29155, which is one of their special operations units, who actually published a paper in the late 2000s about using microwave burst transmissions to injure people's brains, and that's mighty suspicious. A GRU guy was actually seen in Malta at the location where one of the Americans was hit. So I think this is going on. I think it's Russia doing it. I can't say I completely understand the technology, but there's Bellingcat. There's different sort of open source intelligence groups. The Insider is a group of journalists that insider.com, I think they're called, that I respect, that have done a deep dive into this. And the more I look at it, the U.S. government was a little, didn't want to say it was actually happening. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of things that Russia does. Russia, in my opinion, is at war with the West. Ukraine is just their main battleground right now, but I think they're at war with the West. We will call them destabilizing actions, but we're not going to call them war. But the minute you say, "Gosh, our head of consular affairs at the this embassy in Austria, just got their brain fried and had to quit their job and can't take another job," at that point, that's pretty much an act of war. So I don't think we're saying that, but I mean, from what I understand, all the reading I've done on it, that's what's going on, and it's pretty darn scary.
Yeah, and I did a little research diving deep into that article, and it's important to note that we think what we see on the news is Russia waging a ground war and kind of an air war on Ukraine, but what people don't realize is that they've been waging kind of a paramilitary type of campaign against NATO for the better part of a year now, at least, if not longer. And there's reports out there, and I'm going to put one in the show notes so people can check it out, but they've sabotaged facilities that we know of in Poland, Germany, Britain, Spain, and the Czech Republic, as well as executed over 150 hybrid attacks on NATO territory since Putin invaded Ukraine, and that's in 4 different categories: critical infrastructure, violence campaigns, weaponized migration, election interference, and information campaigns. So it's a much larger war. Like you said, they're waging war against the West. Ukraine just happens to be the battleground now, but it's very clear that Russia is doing other things, and their beef is really with the West and with NATO, and there's so much more to it than that,
Yeah, they had a plan to assassinate Armin Paperger, who is the head of Rheinmetall, which is a German defense group. They successfully assassinated a high-profile Russian defector who was a young guy in his 20s, but he flew a helicopter into Ukraine, landed it, and defected. A Russian helicopter pilot. He went to Barcelona, started living large and showing out, and he turned up dead. What we're seeing is they're calling it the gig economy terrorism and gig economy sabotage, because the West has expelled so many GRU spies and FSB spies and SVR spies that Russians now are recruiting people on Telegram. And I talk about that in the book. There's a GRU colonel who's actually part Czech in the book, named Karol Dvorak, and he is involved in this sort of hybrid warfare that's going on all over the West. And it's a huge thing, and it's getting bigger. And it's we all know about the poisonings and the assassination attempts of Skripal and Litvinenko and all those guys, but just on a daily basis, they have the ships that are dragging their anchors over our telecommunications lines and pipelines, and they're jamming GPS signals of commercial airplanes. And they found a couple of bombs that were scheduled to be shipped on DHL flights. And I mean, it's bad and getting worse. And I don't think it, like you said, I don't think it's really getting the play that it should.
No. How close of an ally and kind of in cahoots do you think China is with Russia and some of this stuff? Because I did a little bit of research and I found some interesting things, but I want to get your take on that. How close do you think they are working together?
Yeah, so I haven't looked at that closely. I mean, obviously, Russia is an ally to China in some degree. Not to the extent of North Korea,
Yeah.
but they're right there. I mean, just today in the United Nations, it's today is the 3-year anniversary of this phase of the war when Russia went in to take Ukraine in 3 days, and we're starting year 4 of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a resolution in the United Nations to condemn Russia's attack, and the people who voted against condemning it were Russia, obviously, North Korea, obviously, Belarus, obviously, and the United States. Even China abstained, which is kind of amazing. But I do think that I don't know what you have looked into, but I haven't looked at that directly. I get kind of myopic when it involves the book,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't picked up much on what China's doing, but I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, so they've been a really big influence in telecom. So that big cyber attack that came out last year, where they hacked into and shut down a couple of telecom companies, AT&T, I think T-Mobile was another one. Yeah, so they basically, the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency came out and said, Operation Salt Typhoon is what they're calling it. Was basically an attack on the routers and the switches for 9 different telecom companies and internet providers, and it was the worst telecom hack in U.S. history. So, they're being rambunctious as it is, and I can't help but think that Russia's getting a little bit of help when it comes to some of that technology, because they're not doing it on their own. And Russia's been waging this war for 3 years now. Going on 4, like you said.
Yeah.
At what point in time are they going to run out of ammo?
Yeah, and there's been so many sanctions on Russia from the West, so a lot of the technological stuff is sanctioned. That doesn't mean it doesn't come in from the West. It has to come in through other channels, and that pipeline is degraded. So there's China, and who's really good at tech stuff and has a lot of it, and the ability to get it over the border into Russia. So I mean, it stands to reason for sure.
Last big question before I let you go. Do you think China tries to take Taiwan, or it's kind of been a threat for a while now? But do you think it eventually they move on it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what we do. It depends on what the United States does in the next 6 months, to me, in some regards, because I think our allies are looking at us right now and going like, okay, there's treaties. There was the Budapest Memorandum, these security guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
Are they worth anything, or is America just transactional? Is America like, give us $500 million in rare earth minerals for stuff we've done in the past, and then sign this thing and be done with you? I think if you look at Taiwan, it's very far away from the United States, surrounded by water, surrounded by China, and look at Ukraine. There is a very sophisticated rail network from NATO countries, from the West, from places where the U.S. has bases. If we don't support Ukraine with all the ease there is to support Ukraine, what the hell are we going to do if Taiwan was, really threatened or attacked? And I think that the Chinese have, huge advantages in their Navy, and we have disadvantages from geography. And, I wonder what our friends and our enemies will do, depending on what we do in the next few months. So I don't know the answer to it, but I do feel like China feels like not only is Taiwan theirs, I feel like they think the whole, the Philippines or Vietnam anyway, and other places would be the next places to follow. Just like I think Russia won't stop at Ukraine. It's just a sad fact of the world.
Well, it's scary to think what they could do. If China takes Taiwan and we kind of walk away limping from that, what do they do next? Like you said, do they go to the Philippines? Do they look at Vietnam? Do they, what does India do? Well, India's right there. They're trying to kind of repair ties with us a little
Yeah.
bit. They're a
Yeah.
big player on, the global economy scale. They have a lot to lose,
Yeah.
and they're really, really close. And then, and like you said, what happens the next 6 months? Do we get a deal
Yeah.
done with Ukraine? Do we stop some of this nonsense? Because NATO's looking at us, and your Europe allies are looking at us and going, "What? We're not as strong of an ally as we used to be," and that is
Yeah.
coming into question now.
Sure.
How we react to things the next 6 months, like you said, I agree, is
Yeah.
is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I'm a kind of a pro partnership guy. I'm a pro NATO guy. I know that there's good reasons. There's a lot of reasons to feel that Europe has fallen short in their security expenditures, for example, and
Yeah.
some of their rhetoric and their policies. I definitely, you know, every relationship is an imperfect relationship. My relationship with my dogs is an imperfect relationship. That doesn't mean I don't love my dog,
Right. Right.
and so you know, I think my personal, I just grew up interested in foreign policy and international affairs. I got my degree in that, so I am going to fall on the side of partnerships and cooperations and
Mm-hmm.
treaties and that sort of thing. But I do think we always need to move carefully with our allies. But the one time Article 5 was employed, which is when one NATO member is attacked, all NATO members have to join, and that one time is September 11th, and over 1,000 NATO members died in the global war on terror, and they died because of the United States, because the United States was attacked, and they came to
Mm-hmm.
help us. 24 or 48 Danish NATO soldiers were killed, and hundreds of others. So I'm a pro partnership person. I'm not saying that it's all kumbaya and rainbows.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think I don't mind America taking a harder stance, or even threatening, as far as going back to, not to be too political, but going back to Trump trying to get Europe to spend more of their GDP on defense. I
Yeah.
think that has worked. The other thing that has worked is Russia knocking on their door and moving with impunity. That's maybe worked even more. But
Yeah.
I do think these partnerships are really important for the United States.
Well, and what you put in that partnership agreement is stuff that's got to be upheld. I think that's when,
Right. Yeah, or it's worthless. Yeah.
yeah, it's worthless, and that's where your relationship lies. When you're giving up, it's just in any relationship. If
Yeah.
you're constantly loaning money or giving up free rides to your best friend, and then once in a blue moon they hook you up, it's a lopsided,
Yeah.
kind of relationship, and that over time that's going to become kind of toxic, and you're going to have your problems for no
Yeah.
reason other than just that. So I think to build a stronger relationship and to help kind of deter Russia, like, we do have to be together all as one as NATO, and people are
Yeah.
going to start chipping in their part and holding up to the
Yeah.
agreement and making that agreement rock solid and ironclad. And then Putin's going to think twice about going any further than Ukraine, because a
Yeah.
united front is a intimidating thing. Right now, I don't think he's that
Absolutely.
intimidated.
Right. Right. I think he's very curious as to what's going on, seeing what buttons he can push and what leverage he has. And militarily, Russia has done a horrible job in the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Politically, I think the next 6 months are going to tell us whether they won this war or not.
Yep. Well, Mark, congrats on the release of Midnight Black. I loved it. It's a
Hey,
fantastic Gray
thanks,
Man
man.
book. It's one of my top, next to Sierra Six and the original Gray Man. It's one of my favorites for sure.
Awesome. That's great.
Tell people where they can go find more about you and kind of follow along with your adventures this year.
Sure. I have a website. It's my name, Mark Greaney, which is Greaney books.com. I'm on all the social media, just Mark Greaney Books. You can find me on all the necessary evil social media groups. And I'm not on TikTok, but don't go looking for me on TikTok. I'm 57 years old, so not all the social media. Once I said that, I was like, wait, that sounded weird. But I'm out there. I'm out at the usual suspects where you can find a 57-year-old guy. Well, you can probably find that on TikTok, but that's a whole nother hour, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not go there.
All right, Mark.
So I'm out there, and I hope people will check the book out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mark, thanks. We'll go offline. Appreciate everybody listening, and make sure you go get your copy of Midnight Black today.
Thanks, Jeff.